Hello, and welcome to another edition of UDC Forum. I'm Dr. Sandra Jowers Barber, Assistant Professor of History at the University of the District of Columbia, and your host. In 1937, an 80-foot-high granite obelisk standing in Aksum, Ethiopia, was stolen by military troops of the fascist Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. For years, Ethiopians fought and prayed to have their ancient artifact returned. A few years ago, their prayers were answered when officials in Rome agreed to make arrangements to have the artifact returned to Ethiopia. 86-year-old engineer Tadeleron Batel Kabrat, a civil engineer, author, and Ethiopian scholar, played a major role in that endeavor. Engineer Tadeleron, as he likes to be called, was the lead technical advisor for the committee to return the Ethiopian obelisk from Rome, Italy, to its original home in Ethiopia. He was invited to speak at the University of the District of Columbia by the UDC Ethiopian Student Association, and he joins me as my guest to talk about his involvement in this historic event. Also joining me is Los Angeles native Yah Frederick Davis. Mr. Davis is a former aerospace engineer and the founder of the Pan-African Technical Association, an association of volunteers, supporters, and friends who share a deep-rooted interest in exposing, educating, and supporting the introduction and perpetuation of science and technology in African American communities in the United States and African communities in Africa. Mr. Davis's organization sponsored Engineer Tadeleron's trip to the United States. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Now, this is a very historic event that you have been involved with. Give us a little background on how you became involved and your participation.
Thank you. The whole idea came from an Italian scholar of the Milano University, Dr. Francaviglia, who suggested that the obelisk should be returned to its rightful owner, which is Ethiopia. Learning that, Professor Richard Pankhurst wrote petition to Addis Ababa University students and made them sign. And also later, he invited famous Ethiopians across the country to sign on this petition. And encouraged by that, a committee was formed, an Ethiopian committee called the People's Committee for the Return of the Aksum Obelisk. And I was appointed as its General Secretary. And we were involved for 3-4 years in asking the government of Italy as well as the Ethiopian government to support our ideas. The Ethiopian government unanimously at the parliament approved our demand, and they organized an office called the National Coordinating Committee for the Return of the Aksum Obelisk. There I was appointed to be one of the members, of the 8 members. At the same time, we had subcommittees. So I was also appointed vice chairman of the Technical and Logistics Committee, as well as the co-signer of the Financial Committee. That means all expenses were approved and signed by me. So from that day on, we started negotiating with the Italian government. It took many years to convince them, but finally we succeeded to do that.
Why do you think it took so many years to convince them?
Well, there are several reasons. One reason is that the Italians wanted to have it in Italy to show that they had conquered, according to them, colonized Ethiopia, which they never did. They occupied Ethiopia for 5 years. The second reason is that you will see in the film that there are Italians who thought that this is a compensation for the factories, roads, and other things that are built in Ethiopia during the occupation. The third thing is that the fascists were strong for the first few years, and they had also the fascist government, and they also fought against its return. In spite that, an agreement was signed with the United Nations in 1947, when Ethiopia demanded payment or compensation for the war loss, and also at the same time asked our properties to be returned. So the Italian government signed an agreement saying that they will return all the looted properties, including the Aksum obelisk, within 18 months of the signing of the contract, which they never did.
Now, did the Ethiopian government press them for that return, or when did the movement start?
At the beginning, we pressed them, and our ambassador in Italy, Dr. Emmanuel Abraham, he was the one who tried for several years, but he failed. So during the Derg, when the feudal government was thrown down and came the communists, nobody asked. So it was after that that Francavilla suggested that this property should be returned to Ethiopia. And so our campaign started in 1897.
Are you surprised?
1987, sorry.
Are you surprised that it was a scholar that led the final push to sort of make this happen?
No, he was in Ethiopia during the occupation as a young boy. And he loved Ethiopia and Ethiopians' hospitality and Ethiopians' gentleness and so on and so forth. So he was really at heart was affiliated to the Ethiopian feelings and understanding.
Was it ever a political tool or pawn, the return of the obelisk here in the United States, that perhaps would have been an issue that a politician may have used in his or her campaign for elective office? Was it ever that way in Ethiopia, that any politician made the return of the obelisk a political issue?
No, on the contrary. During Haile Selassie's time, the parliament, the then parliament, forbade the emperor to visit Rome until the obelisk is returned. And after the fall of the communist government, the present government that is, they unanimously, including the opposition, supported our appeal for the return of the Aksum obelisk. So there was no difference in Ethiopian attitude.
When it was first taken away, you were a very young person.
I was 9 years old.
You were 9 years old. Was it included in your history? Was that one of the important artifacts that was talked about as you were growing up and going through school? Should I say theft or the removal of it?
Unfortunately, in the Ethiopian history lessons, nobody mentioned neither about the obelisk nor even the occupation, except passing by maybe 2 lines. So it's after the return of the obelisk, we tried also to have it in our textbooks, and we didn't succeed. But now that I get this support from you and the American people, I'm going to ask the Minister of Education to have it included in the history books. Because I didn't only make the film, but I also have written a book which is about 640 pages. I'm waiting until the final work on the obelisk is finished. That is, when we erected the one that came from Italy, we had tied the old one to protect it from falling by the heavy movement around the area. And that anchoring is still standing there. And I've asked the UNESCO to please remove it because they are responsible. There are 3 groups who are responsible. The Ethiopian government, because it's their property, the Italian government, because they paid all the expenses, and UNESCO, because they were engaged or employed to the re-erection. And it was with their approval that we have tied the old obelisk. And it was their duty to see it removed, but they never did. And when I wrote a letter to Paris and asked UNESCO, they said they didn't have funds. Then I asked the Italian government. The Italian government said our responsibility was to return, and the re-erection was a fringe benefit in the activity. But they say that if the Ethiopian government asks us to fund them, then they should apply, and not me, Tadele, as an individual. So I told even this to the Ethiopian government or the Minister of Culture, but they were very dormant and adamant about it, and I'm working on it. In fact, Professor Croce, the Croce Association, who did the design of dismantling and re-erecting, made a design for me free of charge, which cost about $34,000 design, how to stabilize it before removing the cables. That was needed because when we investigated around it, the soil under the obelisk was washed away, and that makes it very dangerous to remove the cables because it may fall. Therefore, to protect it, I'm working on it, and I have written to our Prime Minister, and I've talked with the Minister of Culture, and I've talked with Croce. As I told you, they did this work, engineering work, worth $34,000, and I have the design and everything ready. So all we need is financing. I hope someone, some millionaire in America who hears this would give me the fund, which is not much. It's about $340,000, the whole work to establish.
Tell us, how do you move an 80-foot high granite sculpture? How do you do that?
You mean when we brought it?
Right.
Well, there are two. First, when it was taken from Ethiopia, it was fallen for 600 years and broken in 5 pieces. Now, when they took it to Italy, they put 3 dowels on each joint, and they strengthened it and put it together with concrete and dowels. Now, when we removed it in 3 pieces because the top part was weak to dismantle it. So we left as it was, and we only dismantled in 2 places. And to do that, we had a hydraulic jack. We established a cantilever on the bracing, on top and bottom of the place where it was to be cut. And then we put the jacks around it, about 16 of them, around the obelisk, and pushed on the cantilevers. On the lower cantilever it was sat, and the upper one was pushed slowly. At the same time, we had a heavy crane, 164-ton lifting capacity crane, which lifted, so it was pushing and lifting at the same time. And after it was dismantled, then there was another crane at the bottom of the bracing that, while the other pulls it, this one was turning it and put it horizontal, and we put it on a low bed and drove it to the station where it was supposed to wait until we took it to Ethiopia. So it was really an engineering feat. I hope that all engineering students would be interested to see this film and later on ask me questions as you did, so that I can explain the details, because it's important that they know this is not like a second-hand clothes put in a container and brought to Ethiopia. It had a lot of research had to be done, and a lot of gadgets had to be manufactured only for that. For example, you see when we cut separated the concrete from the real stone under it, we had to put a wire, a rope made of diamond, and you press it from behind and cuts it and comes out. And that's an interesting engineering work. And this has to be manufactured especially for this purpose.
This is just amazing.
Including the round saw which cut the sides of that. And that was also diamond coated saw, steel saw, but diamond coated. It was strong. So it cut it smoothly on all 4 corners. And once it is clear from its surrounding, then we had to cut it back from the back with this rope of diamond cord. So imagine a cord cutting a granite, which is very, very strong stone.
How long did it take?
Well, to do the whole work from the time Francavilla mentioned up to the time of return and re-erection, 17 years. I have participated 17 years on it. And to do the film, it has taken me 4 more years because I had to get historical materials from England, France, and Italy, and pay for it too. And then I had my own film crew while we were working, and when I was not working, I took the film myself. So the film was made from historical archives, made by my crew and by myself, and then I had supporting materials from UNESCO, Italian television, French television, and British television.
This is the kind of project I would love to have gotten my students involved in, from the technical piece, the engineering piece, the historical, the research, everything that went into it, and you spent so much time. Tell me about the emotional aspect when you finally had it dismantled, or you were dismantling it and brought it back to Ethiopian soil.
The first thing I can say is that in Italy, all the most of the Ethiopians who were at the site, they were crying and singing and shouting and clapping. Now, when it came to Ethiopia, I think a good example is to give you one of our lady ministers who was involved, also was in my committee at the later stage. You know, the first time she saw the first piece come, she ran, you know, cross, which is forbidden to come around.
Good afternoon. This is Tamrad Madin from Little Ethiopia. Today I'm by myself because Patricia McDougall is out of town. And I have 2 guests with me. One came from Ethiopia. You just saw a short movie about what he has done. And also another guy from a Little Ethiopia ambassador over here to speak about some of the activities he does in terms of visiting Ethiopia occasionally. So I will first introduce the gentleman on my right. He's known as Engineer Tadele Butul Kibret. He is a civil engineer and a member of the national organization that was able to repatriate the Ethiopian obelisk that was looted by Italy at the time when Ethiopia and Italy were at war between 1935 and 1941. And first and foremost, I would like to say thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you.
In addition to the other 2 events you attended with us, you did the Africa Day celebration on May 25, and yesterday also you gave an interview on an Ethiopian TV show, which is very good, and you have another one coming this afternoon that's going to be held in Alexandria City, where you're going to be showing your movie, right? How long is the movie, by the way?
It's about 45 minutes. The English version is 45 minutes.
It's 45. Is that the one you're showing, the English or the Amharic version?
No, the English for the benefit of foreigners.
Okay, so you're going to be showing it this afternoon at a restaurant called Hever on 410 Georgia, 410 Glebe Road, East Glebe Road in Alexandria. Okay, first and foremost, can you give us a brief statement how you got involved in this, and a brief statement who you are?
Well, my name, as you mentioned, is Tadele Butul Kibret. I'm a civil engineer by profession. I was invited by the National Coordinating Committee to be a member of the organization, and as member, I also became the subcommittee chairman for the Technical and Logistic Association. So, because I'm responsible as a technical man, I did most of the work and the negotiation both in Italy and the work in Ethiopia and in Italy. So because of that, I ventured to do a film to show the history of the return of the Aksum obelisk, starting from the skirmishes at Wall in 1935 by the Italian government. So it's a very interesting film. It's educational, especially for historians, archaeologists, and engineering. They can benefit by looking at this film.
Very good. Thank you so much. So how long will it take you to put this together, the group to them?
I started, it is interesting, the Dutch film company, television company, asked permission to record all the events from the very beginning. And our committee members were against it because they thought that the Ethiopian television would do the job, which they did. So realizing that, I ventured on myself. I took the liberty to do the film. So I have done from the very beginning, from the time we investigated the area up to the re-erection.
Fantastic. Well, this is a great precedent. As you know that artifacts, historical, ancient artifacts and other items were taken from many, many countries, especially Ethiopia. As you recall, the British were in control more or less for the next 3 years in Ethiopia. And it is believed that there are lots of Ethiopian artifacts in British museums, palaces, and other places. Is there anything your committee is going to be doing on that also?
Yeah, well, our hope was to start with this signing. This is a contract, the Italian government has signed with the United Nations. They have no leeway of escaping from returning it. So once we succeeded that, we thought of continuing to fight to bring back all other cultural properties stolen and are hoarded in the libraries and museums of other countries. For example, in England, there is that from Muscal, from Magdala. The many books, thousands of books from the library of Theodros. And the Italians have, for example, Graziani has taken 5 crowns and all the noblemen's clothes, and he has a museum in his name in Italy. It's funny. So we are trying to return, and there is an airplane called the Eagle of Sahai, one of the first airplanes that has come to Ethiopia, and that is standing at the Italian Aeronautical Museum. So we are going to try to get it back.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Graziani. I know you know the fact that in 2012, a city near the Rome, the capital city of Italy, has erected a memorial for Graziani. Do you know more about that thing? Do you know about that?
Yeah, it's shameful because Graziani has not only killed many people in Ethiopia, but he's known also as the butcher of Libya, because when he was in Libya, he has killed hundreds and hundreds of Libyans. So it's funny that instead of being accused of 4 crimes, he is being honored by erecting a statue or a monument for him, a mausoleum for him. And we are fighting to see it that this thing should be demolished or eradicated or stopped. There is an association, Ethiopian association, a group of people, including yourself, who are fighting to stop it or to re-establish the proper aspect of the history.
Well, thank you so much. My suggestion is different. My suggestion is I want it to be there. If his people are proud of him, let it be there. But we should have a sign next to it saying that this general has killed over 30,000 in 3 days, February 19, 20, and 21, 1937. That's what we like to add. Okay, thank you so much. Going back to your work, how many governments were involved in this? And
6 governments.
6 governments?
Yeah.
How is it? I know Italy and Ethiopia. Who else?
Zewditu, Haile Selassie, Italy, and again Haile Selassie, the Derg, and now.
Oh, you are saying that started at the time of Empress Zewditu?
Zewditu, yeah.
Which I think she ran, from 1916 to 1930, right?
Yeah.
Huh. How about Liju Iyasu? Because
Well, I didn't. I
You haven't
was
seen?
born at his time.
Okay, great. That's very
I was
interesting.
born in 19.
Okay. While we are discussing this, I like to bring our friend over here. He spends many times, he goes to Ethiopia because what Little Ethiopia is doing is an educational organization, or we have an online magazine to teach all the people around the world, but especially the African Americans, the Caribbeans, and the other black people who are really at the yoke of colonialism and other things in the past, and they were very, very, very proud of Ethiopia. If you remember, last Thursday we had one of the speakers, Mr. Historian, Mr. Harry Jones, how he was explaining how much the African Americans look into Ethiopia in the past. So we have a gentleman here next to me, Ambassador Matt Andrea. You've been to Ethiopia many, many times. Have you seen any kind of remnants from you noticed from the Italian occupation?
Well, I've been to Aksum 3 times, and the first time I visited Aksum in 2006, the obelisk was not there. The second time I visited, it was right after the obelisk had been returned, but it was still in very large crates on the ground. And my last visit to Aksum was to see the obelisk, proudly reinstalled. I wasn't there for the actual event, but I saw it about a year after it was re-erected, and it was phenomenal to see it there. So I can't say that I've seen much in the way of remnants. I've seen a few monuments to Italians in various places. I've seen some roads and bridges that the Italians built, some buildings, but there's really not a whole lot of evidence of the Italian occupation. But I'd like to shift the subject a little bit, because I know we kind of jumped right into this discussion of the obelisk as if it was kind of a given, but I'd like Tadele to comment a little bit on the significance of the Aksumite Empire, and talk a little bit about the time period when these stelae or obelisks were erected, and what the purpose was, and what was the significance of the Aksumite Empire in that part of the world.
The Aksumite Empire is in parallel to the Assyrians because it was the center of civilization in the Middle East at that time. And the Aksumites were technically ingenious people. They had over 740 obelisks hewn from single rock, each one of them, ranging from 2 meters high and weighing about 10 tons, up to 33 meters long and weighing 500 tons, one piece of stone. The amazing thing is that this huge stone is carved on all 4 sides. And it is possible to carve it on 3 sides, but it's really phenomenal to know that even the bottom part of it is carved equally, symmetrically into several floor, simulation of several floors. So that shows that technically they were very, very much advanced. And Ethiopia is not only for its obelisk, but also there are churches, rock-hewn churches like Lalibela. And in Tigray there are about 17 of them. In Lalibela there are 9, all hewn from the mountain. This second thing. And the other thing is that, believe it or not, Ethiopia is the first nation that has created musical notes by Saint Yared. And that is 270 years before Beethoven and others created their own notes, musical notes. And Ethiopia is also the only African country that has its own alphabet, literature. Our books are written on parchments, and they are handwritten, most of them, and they are decorated with paintings, pictures, and a lot of designs. So looking at that, one can say Ethiopia was the center of civilization 3,000 years ago.
Absolutely. And as an engineer, you must admire hugely the feat of their being able to quarry these stones and then transport them as a single piece from the quarry, which is like about 2 kilometers, at
Five-
least
five
5
kilometers.
kilometers away from the actual site where they were erected.
Yeah.
And I've seen many like fanciful drawings or imaginary drawings of how they must have dragged these across the land with elephants and rolling them on logs and so forth. But then also just the engineering feat of erecting them once they got to the site where they were installing them. I mean, it's just how that was done is mind-boggling.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have no record how they did it. And that's why I made this film, because the film that, the objects that came back from Italy, 100 years from now, from today, after we all have passed away, if somebody tells that this obelisks that came from Ethiopia, they didn't have had a clue if I didn't make this film and leave a legacy for them. So the purpose of my producing the film is just to fill that gap which we missed in the true history of the erection of the obelisk. And you asked me, why did they erect it? Well, these obelisks were erected to commemorate the noble men. As you can see at the top, there is a sort of semi-circle, which indicates the masculine.
Yeah, you see there on the top, yeah.
Yeah, the masculine organ, the top, the circle one. And that shows that this is made only for noble men and not for noble ladies, so to say. This is speculation again, because we have no written evidence, but you know, sometimes you deduct.
But remember, that's not politically correct now, you know. It should be inclusive of everybody.
No, the politics has nothing to do in our time. At that time, we were very peaceful. We have no political qualms.
And just a couple technical questions, like when it was flown from Italy to Ethiopia, well, what type of aircraft carried these segments? And I'm sure they could only carry one segment at a time because of the incredible weight.
Well, it's not the weight that is difficult, but it's the landing space. If it carried 120 tons, the whole obelisk, it would have had a landing space of 3.5 kilometers. And the Aksum airport
isn't
is
that
1.8.
Right.
So it was not enough. So we had to diminish the size in order to be able to land it in a short distance. Not only that, also we had to choose the time, because when it is hot there is friction. So to alleviate the friction between the tires of the airplane and the tarmac, we chose, I personally, for 3 weeks, I was sleeping at the airport and studying the proper time, and which is should be below 15 degrees or around 15 degrees. And we reached the conclusion that between 3 o'clock in the morning up to 6 o'clock, that is an ample time. That's why the airplane came early at 5 o'clock.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Well, I just commend you for your persistence and your determination and your dedication to this, because for anybody who goes now to visit Aksum, they can see this incredible obelisk in its full glory, and it's really an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And then just to touch it and to think about it, you know, everybody of course admires the pyramids in Egypt, but the pyramids are made of sandstone. Sandstone is relatively easy to cut.
Not only sandstone, but there were pieces of sandstone.
Right, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
one on top of the
so
other.
this is great. These monuments are made of granite, which is
Yeah.
one of the hardest stones on earth,
Yeah.
and they were made roughly 2,000 years ago, what kind of instruments could they have had at that time to cut this stone?
I believe, this is my personal opinion, I believe they had special gadgets or axe or saw, pickaxe, for carving them, because in one place there is a sign, a meter of measurement, in about 1 centimeter each, about 2 meters long. So probably they have used this by measuring, with rope and so on to make it symmetrical. That's one thing. And then we have found a piece of iron, a peg of iron, like this, and the big stones, the big floors, they were held together by putting this peg, by getting a hole on each slab, and put that one so that they would move. So if they did that, if they had that knowledge, they must have a system of cutting and hewing these obelisks. But unfortunately, we have no record, and that's a pity.
Well,
It's amazing.
they're really awesome, incredible pieces of work, and
It can't be
it's-
done today. For us, it's, for example, we dismantled the obelisk in Rome. We had to 160-ton lifting capacity crane just to pull it back. After it's separated.
Yes.
Imagine. And only 60
amazing.
tons.
Yes.
Yeah, for 60 tons, we had 164-ton lifting capacity crane. And the question is, how did they move it? How did they install it? This is a mystery. And it's good that it is a mystery, because that gives them a glory of being wise.
Well, and it's because Ethiopia is full of so many incredible mysteries like this that I find it a magnet that just draws me back
Yeah.
again and again. I can't stay away.
Let me give you another example. There is a sort of a casket for the dead, a huge stone, about the size of a human
Size.
being, and it is void. When you hit it like this, it sounds it's empty, but it's all sewn around. There is no sign, and you wonder how did they, put it empty. Probably there are stone remnants, say, of a dead person. But the question is, how did they seal it? How did they close it? We don't know. So they must have had some mysterious way of melting the stone, probably.
Yeah. Well, and there are these subterranean
Yeah, that's it.
caverns within Aksum, in the
Yes.
same area where
Yeah.
the stelae are, and you go down there and you see that they're completely made of stone,
Yeah.
but there is no mortar between the stones.
No.
The stones fit together, and you couldn't. The fitting is so tight.
Perfect,
You
yeah.
can't even get a knife blade. You can see the marks, the seams between the stones, but you can't put anything into that. There's no space there.
Yeah.
Again, a level of precision that we can't achieve even with our most advanced
Sophisticated,
instruments.
Technology, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So how many more members are actively working right now for other projects in the future?
Well, the National Coordinating Committee is dismantled now,
Uh-huh.
but I've tried by writing a letter to the to the Prime Minister, and as well of Ministry of Culture, to establish a new group of people who are interested in the cultural values of Ethiopia, so that we can negotiate to bring back those properties which are in Germany, France, Italy, and England.
It's amazing.
Oh, one other thing that I'd just like to throw into the discussion, just for the audience here who isn't really familiar with Ethiopia, we should point out that it was during the Aksumite Empire, during the reign of King Ezana, that Ethiopia officially adopted Christianity as its religion. Making Ethiopia really one of the first countries in the world to adopt Christianity. So these stelae were originally erected during the previous period when they were not
And after also, and
Christian,
after.
but then Aksum became the center of Christian Ethiopia.
The cavern you mentioned, you know, when you go down, there is a cross on the wall, which was built then. You know, this is in the 300, the year 300 AD.
That's the time when the country accepted Christianity. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you finished your questions? So
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Back to the question earlier I brought, who you are. I believe you and I have common relationship because you know Dr. Hakim Murkana was known as Dr. Martin, Charles Martin. You know his children. His children are your friends, and I believe you are also the when you go to
So Haile Selassie Secondary
Haile
School.
Selassie Secondary School. I went also Haile Selassie First Day School. So you have them as your friend, and finally they came to Ethiopia to fight for their country when the country was under the occupation and they were massacred by Graziani. And I'm also then after several years, I became a friend to their children, Binyam and. So can you give us a brief history about this gentleman? I mean, yeah, if I recall correctly, he was one of the first victims whose embassy was closed on him because the England accepted the Italian occupation to Ethiopia and closed the embassy, and I think His Imperial Majesty was accepted as a private person rather than as a head of state. Can you give us a brief story if you remember that?
Yeah, I think we should go back to the history of Charles Martin or Workana, Hakim Workana.
Okay.
He was, you know, when Emperor Theodorus committed suicide, there were only 3 people left at the battlefield beside him, and that was his wife, Truork, and his son, 8-year-old son, Almayo, and a 3-year-old boy, which is Workana. So they were the 3 ones found there. So the soldiers of the General Napier took them down to their camp, and then they brought them up to Egypt. And when they reached Egypt, General Napier asked the Queen Victoria that she has captured 3 people, and the lady or the queen has died on the road, but he has 2 boys with him, and one is the son of Emperor Theodorus. So the queen told him that he should bring the prince or Almayo. So he went to England, and this 3-year-old Workana was left alone. So a colonel called Charles Chamberlain, he took him to India with him. And unfortunately, Charles died. 2 years later, he died of cholera.
The colonel?
Charles.
The colonel?
Yeah, the colonel.
Okay, uh-huh.
So another friend of his, Martin, adopted this Workana. So he got, they didn't know his real name, so they called him Charles Martin, by the 2 mentors, the name of the mentors. And at the age of 22, he became a doctor because there was no discrimination. He looked like Indians, and he went to school. And at the age of 24, the Italians waged war, the Adwa Battle War. And he read it in the newspaper, and he immediately decided to come to Ethiopia, bought medicine and tent to come to Ethiopia to fight, not knowing even Amharic, you know, but his blood, because he's Ethiopian, he knew that. And when he came to the port of Zela, the governor told him, no, you can't go because the Italians have occupied all the way. They have occupied from the south. So he went back. And immediately when he returned to India, he was told the Ethiopians had defeated the Italians. So he came back, and he became the first medical doctor of Menelik II. And when he came into the country, he realized that there is no geography book in Amharic. And he said, how can a nation that has no geography, does not know geography, know about civilization and the advancement and so on so for other countries. So he studied Amharic in 3 years and wrote the first world geography. So he's a phenomenal person, really. Then after he retired, he went back to his country. After he retired, came to Ethiopia, and two of his sons were born in India. Binyam, the ones you know, Binyamin's son,
Benjamin Yosef.
Yosef, and they came with him, and they went to England with him because he became ambassador of Ethiopia in 1935, 1 year before the war, and he was stationed there until the Italians waged the war officially in 1936. He was ambassador, but then the British, being sorry, Abid,
Okay, while he's
Manuel.
he's
Say
talking
yes.
to his the phone,
يدور on television. يدور له.
I like to. Hey, do you excuse me? Excuse me. Sir, are we okay on the voice? That okay? You hear us? Is it okay?
Yeah, maybe if he's like a little bit closer. Then
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
So he came back and he wrote this book. And in 1935, he was appointed as ambassador. And he worked until 1937 peacefully. But in 1937, the British government decided to acknowledge Italy as the colonizer of Ethiopia. So they couldn't keep him as
Was it
Ethiopia's ambassador.
1937 or 1936? Because if I
37,
recall
37.
correctly,
The two wars
when the
were
emperor
37.
went, when he left Addis on May 5, he went to England, and then after that he went to Geneva. I thought it was in 1936 that they told him not to stay in the
37,
embassy. He was out?
37.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Haile Selassie came during his occupation. He came first with Dr. Lorenzo Tazas
Yeah.
to write the speech for him. They came to Geneva and they wrote and they gave him. And they
That was in June 1936.
1936.
Okay. Because they went there in May 5. Within a short time, he went to
Yeah.
Geneva. Yeah.
And they returned it. They returned it back, and he worked as ambassador. In fact, he has written many articles in Sylvia Pancras' newspaper called New Times and Ethiopian News.
Mm-hmm.
Every day has a written article opposing the Italian occupation, invasion, the gas bomb, and so on. And then the Italians, the British, because they were afraid that Mussolini would cooperate with Hitler and wage war, so they called him persona non grata. He's no more ambassador.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he decided to return to India, where he knows best. But in the interim, his two children, the ones you know, they were he sent them to Ethiopia to fight for their country. And they came to Ethiopia and they were captured and killed. So a newspaperman told him, now your children, both your sons are killed. He said, I know. He said, I don't mind of their dying, but I mind the dying of my country.
It's amazing.
He was that patriotic.
That's amazing. Well, you mentioned about Sylvia Pankhurst. She's a woman who played a very important role at the time of the Ethiopian occupation. She has been campaigning, helping the emperor, and I'm inviting him next year to join his grandson to join you to place a wreath in front of the African American American Civil War Memorial. We established this event since 2011. Our 10th will be celebrated next year. We celebrate both wars, the Adwa, the first attempt to colonize Ethiopia, and also the second attempt to colonize Ethiopia. And we recognize the African Americans for their also
Support.
fight for the American Civil War. So that's how they get their chance to be free. So I hope you'll be coming, and we are planning to have you here, and we are also going to be trying to see if we can have the former president of the United States, the first black African American president, can come to try his, because there were some interesting articles related to Ethiopia, which we'll discuss it next time.
Okay.
So is there anything you would like to say in conclusion? Any one of you have any more questions quickly?
Well, I just want to say that it's been really exciting getting to know you, Tadele, during your short visit here, and I certainly look forward to getting together with you again the next time I visit Ethiopia. And Tamra, thank you for introducing us.
You're welcome. Well, for some of our listeners, if you are interested, he's going to be screening the movie this afternoon at after 3:30 at 401 East Glebe Road, a restaurant called Heber, that is in Alexandria City. So I would like to say thank you for both of you, and this is I'm very, very impressed with what you are doing. We want people like you, and really we also look some friends like him, we call them the Pharynges, to join us and help us in educating the American public. As you know, the United States, especially Washington D.C., is a great friend of Ethiopia. They welcomed Emperor Haile Selassie for his 6 state visits over here. Recently, we are trying to see that one of the gifts he gave, like another artifacts, was stolen from the chairman of the council. They don't know where it is. We are fighting to get that one, and I had a chance 3 days to talk to the chief of police. Maybe something can be done. So what the effort you are doing, we'll try our best to do it, and we have a helper here. We'll have add some other people and try to connect with you until you come back and visit us next March for Adwa.
Thank you. Thank you very
All right,
much.
sir. Are we done here, sir? Thank you.